Hello. I want to talk about Ulysses S. Grant, Union General. Last time we talked about him, he had just been reinstated. He had fallen out of favor shortly after the Battle at Shiloh. And Henry Wager Halleck came to Pittsburgh Landing on the border of Tennessee and Mississippi himself and took command, essentially benching Grant. And now Grant's been put back in charge of this army. And this army is going to move into Mississippi. And the goal is to take Vicksburg. Vicksburg is a very important city. If Grant is able to capture Vicksburg, it is going to give the Union total control of the Mississippi River. Now, as Grant does begin his movement towards Vicksburg, the very next day after being reinstated, he started moving towards Vicksburg. A large influx of runaway slaves begins to pour into Grant's army. And this is what I want to talk a little bit about today, is how Grant managed this situation. Now, we've seen Grant in earlier discussions of what a talented general he was and all of the skills he had as a general. This is an area where Grant shows great vision. He shows that he was humanitarian. So if these runaways coming into his army, it poses some problems for Grant. It's going to slow his army down, and potentially it could bring disease into his army. So these are some problems that Grant is well aware of, and he's going to manage this very well. So he advises his medical personnel to quarantine any of the sickly runaways. But he goes beyond this, though. He wants to figure out if these runaway slaves, these former slaves, these African Americans coming into his ranks, can be used to work. And if they can work, Grant tells us this in his memoirs. If they're capable of working, then they could be capable of becoming soldiers. And this would be a great benefit. You're taking away all of this labor from the South. You're at least getting labor in return and potentially more soldiers into the Union Army. And this ends up being roughly 180,000 by the end of the war, 180,000 Black Union soldiers. And 60% of that 180,000 were former slaves. Now, Grant makes a move that is applauded by even historians who are somewhat hostile towards Grant. He appoints Chaplain John Eaton to be the superintendent of contraband. And Grant's selection of Eaton was a very good choice. John Eaton was a chaplain from Ohio, godly man, does a great job. Didn't want the job. Grant had to convince him to take the job, where he essentially ordered him to, being the general. And he made sure that Eaton knew that Grant would support him. Grant had the services of Arthur MacArthur, the father of Douglas MacArthur. So General MacArthur would be appointed to make sure that Eaton got everything he needed. So Grant wants to, one, make sure that these runaway slaves are healthy. He wants to treat them if they have any medical problems. He wants to educate them. And the North really comes through. And this is very encouraging as Americans as Christians, a lot of teachers from the North poured in to lend their services, bringing learning materials, books, their abilities as teachers. And this program works. And this is going to become what is going to be later known as the Freedmen's Bureau. So there's going to be a large measure of success here with Grant appointing Eaton to oversee the education of these runaway slaves. And it's a fantastic program. Now, the controversial aspect in history is, was this really Grant? Was this Grant as a compassionate human being? Because detractors of Grant will argue, wait a minute, Grant married into a slaveholding family. His wife, Julia, owned slaves during the Civil War. His father-in-law, Frederick Dent, had roughly 30 slaves. And Grant lived under Colonel Dent's control at Whitehaven, and when he resigned from the military. Grant, at one point in his life, owned a slave. So there is a debate. What kind of man was Grant? Was he this, kind-hearted, compassionate general that comes up with this plan, appoints a man, very capable man, John Eaton, to run the plan, gives Eaton his full support because Eaton was challenged. And every time, Grant came to his rescue, Grant being the major general in the Western campaign. So during 2020, there were a lot of protests in the United States and beyond. And one of the statues that was attacked and torn down in San Francisco was a statue of Ulysses S. Grant. And this shocked a lot of people, as most people view Grant correctly as the victorious general of the Union Army, a good man, a great husband, a good dad, and someone who did care about people. We can see this in Grant's personal writings to his family members. So, the question, what kind of man was Grant? Well, Grant was very private. He did not talk a lot in public. He did not let his opinions be known to the press. Private letters definitely suggest that Grant was a compassionate man. He cared about human beings. And, the fact that he married into a slaveholding family, he loved his wife, Julia, very much. And the slave that he did own, we're not really sure exactly how Grant came in possession of William Jones. But we do know that when Grant went into St. Louis, he had every intention of freeing William Jones. And he stuck to that, even when he was approached and advised that he could sell Jones for in excess of $1,000. And this is 1858 money. So today that would be around $40,000. And if inflation keeps, rising like it is, even higher. So it's a large sum of money that Grant, didn't even hesitate. He went into town to sign Jones into freedom, and that's what he did. So this debate is it's still there. There are some people that argue that Grant was not all that talented, that he got lucky, they didn't really care about people, he was insensitive, and that is, of course, debated by people of the other opinion that no, Grant was someone who cared. He just wasn't very boisterous about it. He didn't boast, look what I've done. And when he becomes president, he does send in the military to shut down the KKK and make sure that black citizens received all the rights that were due to them, including voting rights. So, hard to argue that Grant was not a compassionate man, that he was not a man that cared. But there are some people that carry this argument that no, Grant was a bad guy, didn't care about American Indians, didn't care about African Americans. And I think their argument's a hard one to hold. So that is the controversial aspect of this story. Now, of course, the superintendent of contraband, Chaplain John Eaton, does a great job. He, in his writings, we have his writings, he talks about how Grant gave him his full support, that Grant had a vision to make life better for these runaway slaves who, came into his army, not well, some illness, certainly not doing well for themselves, not proper clothing, some no shoes. And again, Grant sets this great program into motion, and it works very well. And it really helps the North win the war, this influx of labor, and then, soldiers, 180,000 soldiers added to the ranks at a time where the volunteer enthusiasm was wearing out. Lincoln had to institute a draft. So this influx of soldiers did help. All right, so next time we meet, we'll talk about the drive to take Vicksburg and get back to Grant's military skills and abilities that he possessed. But we wanted to make sure we got this moral argument debate about Grant into our discussions. Thank you.